So I studied film as an academic subject as a master's student, and because of that, some people, friends of mine, think that my favorite movies must be all foreign films or esoteric movies or documentaries or things like that. But if anybody knows me, they know that I also like, every once in a while, Wendy's and KFC. And so one of my favorite films of all time, actually in my top 25, is the 1992 classic White Men Can't Jump, starring a young Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes. So my favorite line, there's so many classic lines in the movie, but my favorite line is delivered by Gloria, played by, this is Woody Harrelson's girlfriend, played by Rosie Perez. And she turns to Woody at one point in the movie and says, just like this, "Billy, you're so stupid. Don't you know that sometimes in life when you lose, you actually win? And sometimes when you win, you actually lose?" That ended up sounding more like Al Pacino from Scarface, but I think you get the point. My story is about the phenomenon of benefit of the doubt, and a little bit about discrimination also. So there's an appetizer and then there's the main course. So here's the appetizer. So when I was a high school student, I went to a big high school in the middle of Connecticut, 2,200 kids, and I was a good student. I liked school, and I was in all these different clubs, kind of not too different from now, actually. And I liked school, and apparently people in the school knew that I liked school and things like that, and you'll see why that's important in a second. I was in my junior year, so it's my third year, and I was in French class. I was kind of like studying languages. I studied Japanese, Russian, and French in high school. So I was in French class, and I was really into it. I really liked it. But the teacher, Dr. Bergen, I don't know how you can describe him. I guess the best way is that he kind of had a short fuse, this guy, you know? So you knew not to ever push it with him. Unluckily for me, my best friend in the class, Brandon, was kind of the class clown, and he was always sitting next to me cracking jokes at Dr. Bergen's expense. And one day, I don't remember the joke, but it was a classic, and I really laughed at the joke, you know, and it was just the bad timing, because Bergen snapped, and he said, "Detention for Brandon and Michael," you know. Detention. Like, I have no idea what he's talking. I didn't even know what he meant. I had to go up at the end and ask him, "What does that mean?" And he says, "It means you have to stay after school because you did something wrong." You know, okay, geez. I don't know. I still to this day, I don't know how Brandon got out of it. But at the end of school, I found myself in the principal's office asking, what do I do? I'm supposed to have detention. You know, they said, okay, you have to report to this room on the other side of the building upstairs, something like that. So I walked into this room, and, you know, it's just like a sea of juvenile delinquents, you know, like they're and there's about maybe 40 seats, about 35 of them are filled with kids, and almost every kid already has their head like completely down on the desk like that. There's a few kind of people just like staring off into space, you know, so I was like, oh gosh. And then at the front of the room, there was a place where you sign in. You have to like sign your name, you know, to make sure that you show up. Because I guess if you don't do that, it could be an even worse penalty or something. So I go in and I put my name on this sheet, and then I go sit in one of the empty chairs. And I don't know what to do, so I just pull out my homework and start doing my normal routine. And there's like a proctor or like a teacher at the front who has the awful duty of having to oversee this type of thing, and she just had her newspaper pulled open like that, you know. So I had come in and signed the thing, and then I had never seen this teacher, by the way. I'd never met them. In a huge school like that, there are teachers you just don't know. Well, she at one point, I had been there about 1 minute, and at one point she just puts the paper down, just glances at the sheet, and she does like a double take at the sheet, and then she looks up and she says, "Michael? Is Michael Burns?" Yes. And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "Can you come up here?" And I'm thinking, oh my God, how much worse can this day get? You know, now I'm like somehow singled out. And I go up to the front, and she says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, Dr. Bergen said that I was laughing in class and I had detention. And she said, you don't have detention. You know, just leave. This place is not for you." And I had never seen this teacher before, but apparently she knew me or something like that. And so I left. Obviously, I left. And it seems like she did me a solid there. You know, it seems like she did me a favor, but actually she didn't. You know, this is a really bad lesson to learn when you're an adolescent. The lesson that sometimes the rules don't apply to you. Now that I'm older and I see it from the parents' perspective, I want me to stay in that detention. I learned that day that sometimes the rules don't apply to certain people. It's not necessarily because of that I'm special or anything like that, but it was what I represented to that teacher. Maybe some type of ultimate failure on the part of the faculty if I'm in detention. And that difference means a lot when you're distinguishing between the preferred group of people and the other group. So at the time that this happened, I didn't really care about it, but the more time that went on, especially 3 years later, the lesson of that day came into sharp focus. So we skip ahead 3 years, and I'm 20. This is the summer of 1997, June 1997. And earlier that year, so now I'm at university, earlier that year I had helped to found a labor rights organization on my college campus. And we were advocating for workers' rights for the clothing that bear the university logo, as well as cafeteria workers and janitors on campus. And we had heard from, because this was in Washington, D.C., we had heard from the AFL-CIO, our Federation for Unions, that there was a summer program that people like me could participate in. So liberal-minded kind of activists could go and work with real labor unions for the summer in all kinds of activities, like union campaigns, picket line demonstrations, and other social justice-related activities. So it was kind of like a summer camp for young political activists. I'm so glad something like this actually still exists. Who knows under President Trump, right? So for this camp, I don't think he's going to win, but for this camp program, there were dozens of sites all around the country. But the city that I happened to be randomly placed in was Minneapolis, Minnesota. So if you're not familiar with the U.S., Minneapolis is like north middle. Okay, it's cold there. So I was coming from the East Coast, but there were 15 kids. Some were coming from the Deep South, and some were coming all the way from the West Coast. So it was a big mix of kids. And for some of them, actually, it was like their first trip away from home, away from parents, away from their comfort zones. Looking back on it, the more I think about it, I feel like this is kind of a nightmare for the two organizers, the two retired union officials, Bill and Ralph, who were in charge of chaperoning us from event to event and driving us here and there. I mean, we were 15 like wild kids on summer break, and they were two slow-moving guys in their 60s. So, good on them for doing it in the first place. Maybe anticipating that things could get a little crazy. On the very first day that we met, they held a meeting, and Bill, kind of like the main guy, he said that we're all going to have a great time together this summer. We're going to learn a lot as long as you abide by the one and only one rule, which is that we have to stay together. Even if you don't, some days you might not want to participate as enthusiastically in whatever activity that we're doing, and that's fine, but no matter what, you can never go off on your own. During the day, Bill and Ralph might split us up for something, but it was never okay to go off on your own at night or in the morning, where we would meet for breakfast and plan our day. We stayed in like a hotel, so we would all meet in the breakfast downstairs. He said that if you could follow this one rule, everything would be great. And it seemed reasonable to us. Maybe it seems reasonable to you, too. So the whole union summer thing was, like I said, about a month long, and we were about 1 week into the internship. And they told us that we would be breaking into pairs that day, and we would be helping people register to vote for the upcoming elections that were happening the next year. We would be doing this outside of a mall near downtown Minneapolis. So I was paired with this other guy, Matt, and we were given a clipboard, and we were told to spend the day outside this shop and asking people if they wanted to register to vote, and they would fill out a form. I don't know if you've ever done this before. We'd fill out a form, and then we would take it back to the office and mail it in for them. So Matt and I were assigned to stand outside Target. So if you've never heard of Target before, it's not the most prestigious of department stores. It's not the most glamorous of assignments that we could have been given, but that was okay to us. We had fun standing there in the rain and asking everyone if they wanted to register, and we actually felt like we were doing something important, so I guess that's the main thing. So all kinds, if you know Target, all kinds of people come out of Target all day long, and everybody that comes out, we ask them if they're registered to vote, and they sign our little form if they wanted to. Well, at one point, two young women came out. They were around our age. They came out of the store, and we asked them just like we did everybody else. And they came over and they started filling out our form. I suspect that they actually were registered to vote already, but they came over and they filled out our form. and they were asking us a lot of useless questions. And when they were finished, they waved bye, and I turned to Matt and I said, "Is it just me, or were those girls flirting with us?" And he thought they were also. And so about 10 seconds later, we see their car pull out of the parking lot and then come right back in and then pull up right in front of where we were standing. And one of the girls jumps out, Christine, and she has this little piece of paper with their phone numbers on it. And she said that while we were in town, if we wanted to do something, we should give them a call. So naturally, probably 30 seconds after we finished our assignment at Target, we called them, and so something good came out of Target. You know, who would have predicted? The only good thing ever to come out of Target. What they had in mind was what we did for the next 5 nights, and what they did was they picked us up at the hotel after all the kids had gone to sleep, and especially the chaperones had went to bed, and then we went on these kind of midnight drives around Minneapolis, stopping at different bars along the way. Laughing, talking, generally carrying on as you do. It was all very innocent and pure, in case you're wondering about that. They would drop us off at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we would get a few hours of sleep before we were up at 7 o'clock for our morning planning meeting every day. So after about a half a week of this routine, it became too much for Matt, like my partner in crime, and so eventually it was just me and Christine and Melissa doing these rides. So now it's about a week since we met them, and a week and a half into the internship. And like I said, we were up at 7 o'clock every morning for our morning meeting. Well, this next day, one of the guys in our group, Jason, doesn't show up for the meeting. Okay, so the way that it worked is we were staying in a hotel, and groups of us were staying in different hotel rooms. So Bill said, "Can somebody who's in his room just go up and get him?" And he went up to his room, but Jason wasn't up there either. So this was really strange because no matter what happened during the day, everybody was always there in the morning. So it had been only about 10 minutes, but I don't know whether it's sixth sense or like just intuition or something like that. A few of us were feeling like something more serious was wrong. It just didn't make sense for him not to be there. And so there was another detail that I think is important. Maybe it's not important, but I'll just share it anyway. Jason was mixed race. So he was, maybe one parent was black and one parent was white, just like the president, something like that. Another detail is that he was there's no other way to describe it, very effeminate, very flamboyant. Okay, we had only known each other for one week, so there was nothing about LGBTQ or anything that had come up in the week. But if you absolutely had to decide either way, I think it's a safe bet to say that Jason was a gay man, especially because of what I'm about to tell you next. So there were a few of us that were really concerned, and we thought Jason was awesome, and we all kind of took care of each other. So once we realized that something was wrong, we stepped aside and we talked to Bill and Ralph, and we said, what should we do? And then one of the other guys in his room said that the night before, Jason was going on and on about something, but everybody in the room thought he was joking. And what he was talking about was he wanted to go to the gay district of Minneapolis. This is Hennepin Avenue, if anybody knows that area. And he had even taken out a free ad in the local newspaper just as a way to facilitate meeting people that night, you know. So maybe you might be thinking, well, Jason's kind of asking for trouble. But who knows what his life situation is at home, you know, away from parents, away from certain expectations, away from people watching him. Maybe he felt like he could always do things that he always wanted to, spontaneous things like that. I mean, God knows I was doing that right at that moment. Anyway, we went up to the room and we went through Jason's stuff, every little scrap of paper, every little thing to try to figure out what was going on. And to try to imagine what he would have done. I felt like I was in that movie, Gone Girl, you know, like trying to repiece somebody's life back together backwards, you know, but gone guy, I guess, like in this case. Anyway, a few of us decided we were going to go with Bill and Ralph and find this guy. We were determined. So we went to the police station, went to the gay district, to bars, clubs, all kinds of places, and we described, and this is before the internet, so it was actually kind of difficult. You had to talk to people, you know. No one had seen him, and I had never been in these types of smoke-filled rooms or places where there's black velvet on the walls and people dancing on tables. It's like this world is right in front of you, but you kind of don't see it until you enter it. So it was like a whole new world for me. So the small group of us did this for 2 days. And I can't, it's like this thing in your stomach is just growing and growing by the minute when you can't find somebody and you feel like they're close, you know. But then all of a sudden Bill's phone rings and they found him. And he was okay. Well, he was kind of okay. So Jason had come back to the hotel a few hours before, but he was all beat up and bruised and his clothes were torn and he was shivering. It was kind of, it's cold sometimes at night, even in the summer there. When people were asking him what had happened, he didn't want to talk about it. Okay, all he said was that he was glad to be back and he wanted to keep going with the internship. So we were all quite confused. I know now at the time it seems like, well, that's not a good answer, but you can imagine if you think that person's dead or something like that, just to see them alive, you feel like, okay, everything's all right. So I remember going out, some things you can remember, just like Audrey was saying, some things you can remember so clearly. I remember seeing him and then going out into the hallway and talking to Bill. And I said to Bill, I'm so glad that he's all right. And then Bill turned to me and he said, well, that's nice that he's all right, but he's going home in a few hours. And I said, oh, yeah, I know, but he would like to stay, and actually we have no idea what happened to him. I mean, he could have been mugged or beat up, or, obviously he was beat up. Who knows what could have happened to the guy. Bill said, it doesn't matter what happened to him. We don't fully know what happened, but I don't care. That's not the point. The point is that we had one and only one rule, and he broke it, which was to never leave the group. So I said to Bill, so that's why he's being sent home? And Bill said, yes. See, the thing is that Bill could have said anything at that moment. Bill could have said something incredibly reasonable like, hey, listen, we don't know what happened to this guy, but it's probably the best thing for him just to go home, But he didn't say that. He said that the mystery surrounding Jason was not important at all. The guy left the group, and that's all that matters. Okay? So later that night, of course, I sneak out of the hotel and I go out with Melissa and Christine for our rides and I tell them all about what happened and they, of course, can't believe it. And we make our normal rounds, a few gin and tonics at the first place, a few beers at the next place, and then we head back to the hotel just before the sun comes up. So about 2 hours later, I'm heading downstairs for our morning 7 o'clock meeting. And I'm walking down the hall and I step into the elevator to take it down. And right before the doors close, Ralph, one of the other chaperones, he comes in right after me. And I press the button. And I'm like a total mess. I mean, my eyes are half closed. My hair is all up on the side, and I let out this huge yawn. And I said something like, oh, my God, I am so tired. And then Ralph smiles. And he looks at me and he says, maybe you wouldn't be so tired if you didn't go out drinking every night. So I looked at him, completely shocked that he knew this. And, he gave me that kind of like all-knowing a look that the parents give, that every child knows, something like that, And then everything just started to slide into place. All I could think about was Jason and how he had broken the one rule by leaving the group. Okay, and this is like the final section of the story. So I'll never know for sure why Jason had to go and I was allowed to stay. Maybe I was more like Bill and Ralph. Maybe I wasn't so threatening, even if I wasn't technically following the rules. Whatever it was to this day, it just doesn't sit well with me. Even though there was all this doubt about what was happening with Jason, why was Jason too much trouble and had to be sent home? Meanwhile, at the very same time this is happening, it's like one of those experiments, real-life experiments. There's plenty of doubt about what I'm doing in the middle of the night, but it's no big deal. It's not even no big deal. It's something that you kind of wink about and joke about amongst bros. Isn't this exactly what benefit of the doubt means? That I may not know all the details about you, but you seem like a decent person, and I'm sure what you're up to is really not that bad. And so then it begs the question, what's the opposite of benefit of the doubt? Is it being suspicious of the other person because they're a little bit different or not part of the same group that you are? Is it like a light version of discrimination? Or maybe to put it better, is it the seed where full-blown discrimination actually grows? Is it the very beginning, right at the very beginning when you see someone and you think they might not be up to any good? Or you see someone and that person makes you feel uncomfortable for some reason? So Bill and Ralph are not the villains. I think this is important. I wanted to exonerate Bill and Ralph. Bill and Ralph are not the villains of my story. Okay, they are just like the rest of us. They lean towards giving the benefit of the doubt to people like them because most of the people they know are people like them. Just like us, they work with, they socialize with, they intellectualize with, they go to tall tales with people mostly like them. And the reward for being in that in-group is that you get the benefit of the doubt. And this is the very end. If we want to change that as a society, we have to realize that discrimination is not like a natural reflex. Okay, this is a choice that we're making. It may not feel like a choice, but it is a choice. The choice is to recoil at the other, or to look at our differences as a sign of strength. To do otherwise, okay, in society, to succeed in keeping the other person at arm's distance, to be on guard from people that are from other walks of life or from other communities, is one of those situations where we might win, but actually lose. Thank you.